There are so many stories women carry that never get told. Stories about our bodies, pain, joy, and choices, often shaped by shame, silence, or fear. But what happens when we finally tell them? Today, I'm joined by Dr. Jessica Zucker, a clinical psychologist specializing in women's reproductive and maternal mental health, and author of Normalize It, Upending the Silence, Stigma, and Shame That Shape Women's Lives. Her book invites us to break the silence around deeply stigmatized issues, from miscarriage and abortion to sexual trauma, menstruation, motherhood, and menopause, and to claim the right to speak, heal, and be heard. I'm Sara Jane Ho, and this is Mind Your Manners, where no topic is off limits as we uncover the secrets to feeling at ease in every situation. Dr. Jessica, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw you liked one of my reels. There was obviously a verified check mark. But what really caught my eye was the name of your Instagram handle.
Yes.
Which is, I had a miscarriage. And I thought this is so unusual. And I clicked in and I looked at your profile, I looked at your content, I Googled you, and I thought I need to have this woman on my podcast.
I'm so honored to be here.
Jumping into your story and the psychology of miscarriage, can you tell us about the day of your miscarriage, what happened, how you felt, and how it changed you?
So I was 16 weeks into my second pregnancy. I was actually at my dermatologist 2 days prior, and I went to the bathroom before my appointment and I saw blood. And I contacted my OBGYN immediately, and she asked me the requisite questions. Did you exercise? Did you have sex? Did you do anything unusual? And all the answers were no. So I went directly to her office after my dermatology appointment, and she checked the heartbeat, the placenta, everything looked perfect. So she sent me on my way. And the wheels started turning. How can this be? I did not let myself turn to Google. Google is not a doctor, as I tell all of my patients.
Unlike ChatGPT.
Exactly. Well, that's newer to the scene than it was at that time. And I tried to stay focused. I had at the time a 3-year-old son. I wanted to show up for him as a mother. And as I always tell my patients, how does it really serve us to get caught in the what if anxiety spiral? Mm-hmm. Easier said than done, of course, but I just tried to keep myself busy. And the next day, though, I started having what I now realize were Braxton Hicks. I had a full day of patients. I was driving home, and I could feel my belly contracting. And I called my father, who's a physician, and he was like, well, I guess it's possible at 16 weeks to have Braxton Hicks. I mean, I guess that can happen, and the pregnancy can still be okay. I knew it wasn't going to be okay. And that night I did not sleep. I was in too much pain. The next morning, my husband took my son to preschool, and my husband went off to work. In retrospect, I should have begged him to stay home with me, but I think I just thought, what's the point? Like, I had never heard a story like mine before, so I just figured I was uncomfortable, but something would happen unlike what did happen. And then I called and I made an appointment with a high-risk OB. I wanted to get another opinion, not because I thought my OB didn't know, because she definitely knew as much as anyone could know. I wanted to be seen, and I didn't want to be home alone. Mm-hmm. And so I started getting myself ready to go to the office, and I started sort of spinning. Like, I felt clammy, and it was as if I was having a panic attack, but I don't have panic attacks. And so I thought, you know what, I got to steady myself. I need to sit down. So I went to the toilet and got a wet washcloth and started to urinate. and the fetus came out. So I texted my husband and then my OB, and she called me immediately and she coached me. I had to shimmy with the fetus between my legs because, we were still connected through the umbilical cord. I had to go get what were my eyebrow scissors at the time. She, told me how to cut the umbilical cord myself. And then I began to hemorrhage, as one does, because with the placenta still inside, like, it's just blood. So I put the fetus on the side of the bathtub, and I did kind of study her for a moment. And I don't know. I mean, I hate to say this, but like she looked like my son a little bit. I mean, maybe that's just my imagination, but.
And she was 4 months.
Yes.
Right? I mean, so that's fully formed. I mean, how big is that? Like the size of.
I think, yeah. Like real,
Yeah, like size of your fist.
Yeah. Like it was unfathomable. So my husband, of course, is like racing home through LA traffic trying to get to me. And I can't get off the toilet because
the blood
was constant. And of course, family members were texting, like, call 911. But like, I don't want random huge men running through my home when I'm going through something this life-changing, this traumatic, this intense, this personal. Intimate. Yeah. So my doctor recommended that we bring the fetus to her office in a bag to be tested. And we had to sort of situate a huge bath towel in my pants in order to get to her office, which was just a 12-minute drive. But nevertheless, I was bleeding so much I was afraid to just bleed all over his car. So to make matters even more complex and befuddling, I mean, you won't believe this part. It's not very believable, but it is true. I ended up undergoing an unmedicated DNC.
Which is you have to say DNC stands for?
Oh, a dilation and cerclage.
They scrape your uterus. It's a surgical abortion.
The DNC, yes, is taking out the placenta. So yes, I guess if there had been a fetus there still, then that would be considered a medical abortion. But all they were taking out was the placenta.
So they were scraping your uterus for the placenta.
Yeah, it was like a vacuum more than a scraping.
Okay.
But the sound of the machine will forever be seared into my cells, like into my psyche. And I had my husband play music in my ear, and he held my hand. And, I could have waited for anesthesiology, but then I would have had a blood transfusion.
Because you were losing so much blood.
Yes.
Oh.
And so it just felt like, okay, like in a quick fire sort of way with my doctor, I was like, how long will this take? What's the pain level? Like, will I, have any anesthesia, like anything to numb the pain? And I felt like it was just the better of the terrible options. And also, to be honest, I felt like, how could this be any worse than what I had just gone through?
Mm.
And I could see the fetus over there on the counter, and I could feel the tugging out of the remainder of this pregnancy. And so at 4 months along, I said goodbye to this would-be daughter of mine. And, it was really the most traumatic thing I've ever been through psychologically and physically.
It is a huge loss.
It really is. And, I understand through my work, and through my own experience prior to going through it, if you haven't been through something like this, it's really just so hard to imagine it. My patients I specialize in women's reproductive and maternal mental health, which means that I sit with families talking about miscarriage and stillbirth and infant loss and terminating for medical reasons and perinatal and postpartum mood and anxiety disorders. And I've read all the books and I've been to the conferences and I've had consultation, but until I went through it firsthand, there was just no way to know what you feel psychologically, what you feel emotionally, what you feel physically. And I felt hollow, and I mean, I got wheeled out in a wheelchair because they didn't want me walking after that much blood loss. And we drove home and I wasn't pregnant anymore. I mean, in an instant, going from being so visibly pregnant to no longer pregnant, what a wild and horrible experience.
And I do feel there is a psychological toll to people who've been through a miscarriage. Somebody very dear to me, she was also month 4. She actually had to have an abortion because the baby had it's one of the mental illnesses. I'm forgetting exactly which one.
Mental illness or physical?
Maybe physical.
Yeah.
There was some issue with the baby.
Yeah.
Where if it would be born, it would be disabled for life.
Yes.
And so they had to have an abortion. And I actually flew to Hong Kong to be by her side. And she never told anybody. And I do believe there's a psychological toll. There's shame.
Yes.
Self-blame.
Yes.
There's guilt.
Yes.
And the myth that you have control over it.
Oh, exactly. And I do think, I'm so glad you're bringing up termination for medical reasons, because it's so politicized. So many people don't feel comfortable sharing. And even celebrities, will maybe say to the press that they had a miscarriage because they don't feel safe or comfortable being honest about the situation.
And why is that? Is it because miscarriage remains taboo to this day?
Well, miscarriage remains taboo for sure, but terminating for medical reasons is politicized. And therefore, oftentimes within the pregnancy loss community, they don't want people who terminated to be part of this community,
narrative,
which is terrible. And I sort of insist in my Instagram community that they be included. I have termination for medical reasons in this book. I always include that experience because I think that women who have to make that quote unquote choice or decision are put in, it's an unfathomable heartbreak.
Yeah.
Because they are then told, oh, well, you opted out of the pregnancy, but that is not true. They didn't have an actual choice. They knew their baby was going to die. And sometimes the mother's life is at risk.
Yeah.
So that's not a choice. I mean, it sounds like a choice because they drove themselves to this appointment, but it really isn't. I just wanted to kind of start this book with a deep dive into where it starts. Where does the silence begin? And as Dr. Carol Gilligan found in her incredibly powerful qualitative research, it often starts in puberty or adolescence, as girls are sort of developing and their voices become that much more powerful. She found, though, that there's this way in which they hit a wall and learn to, as she puts it, take part of themselves underground, which is so problematic and concerning for all the reasons. And this, I think, tumbles into the remainder of our lives if we don't figure it out, if we don't stand up and say, I want my life and the culture that I'm surrounded by to be different.
Yeah, and you can change that, right? Even if, let's say, you grew up in a family where these things weren't talked about, or it was stigmatized, it was taboo, you can decide later on how, you can stop that intergenerational culture.
I think so. I think it's risky, and I think I tried it. Yeah, and I highlight that a lot in the book. I didn't want the book to sort of be, I'm not a silver linings person. I don't think everything works out perfectly. I don't like to put, bows on things. However, I do believe it's worth that risk. I just do. I think vulnerability is worth it because even if we're met, let's say, with a parent who is completely disapproving or judgmental or friends who shun us because we share something deeply personal, it says more about them than it does about us. And I think that in order for us to really stave off the shame that just swirls among women, we have to liberate ourselves through sharing what matters.
I mean, what is the cultural cost of staying silent?
Everything, I think. I mean, I think our mental health. I think we are in, this loneliness epidemic. We're in a mental health crisis for so many different reasons. Our world is in so much pain right now. And so I believe as a psychologist that if we let shame insidiously take over our psyches, our bodies, it can swallow us whole and just keep us so quiet that we get in that cycle. I'm bad. I don't deserve to be happy. Something is wrong with me.
When you talk about sort of the cultural attitudes to these things that are considered taboo, I can't help but think of China and how abortion and miscarriage in China, the views are very complex, and it's shaped both by Confucian values as well as socio-political views. Confucius, right, who's been around for over 2,000 years, and that's really how a lot of Chinese people think about their values. He had a focus on you have to continue your family lineage, right? So you want to give birth and have your kids, but at the same time, miscarriage, it's seen as also almost like a traditional Chinese medicine. There's like a medical view towards miscarriage where it's not your fault, it's because of an imbalance in your body.
Okay.
And so we say that it's an imbalance in your qi, in your blood, and in your kidney jing, which is your like essence of your kidney. So it's interesting. Like, people won't judge you so much for miscarriage. Abortion, while it's less openly discussed, also wasn't necessarily taboo. And even hundreds of years ago, there have been TCM tonics for abortion.
Wow.
But it was mainly because, let's say again, if the mother's health was in jeopardy,
okay,
right, and you had to terminate or you had to survive, then there would be TCM formulas for abortion. And then when you move to modern China in 1949, right, when sort of Chairman Mao came up and the communists took over, then there became more of a focus on a one-child policy, especially starting in the 1970s, because China was so overpopulated. And you can get the abortion pill over the counter, like in China, very easily. And so it's very focused on one-child policy. But in the recent 5 years, and this is an issue for many countries around the world, with a declining birth rate, now the government wants to encourage everybody to have more kids. So they're kind of like insidiously, they're kind of reinstalling the stigma.
Wow, interesting.
It's very, very, very interesting.
Wait, so then how are people responding to that? Are they feeling then pressured to have more children and they were used to the idea of not?
Well, here's the thing. Everybody's so accustomed to having just one child now.
Right.
China is now a developed country, right? And as countries get wealthier, as societies get wealthier, they have fewer children. That's the case for all over the world. And also in China, it is very expensive to have a kid, and it's very competitive. Chinese culture is very competitive.
Yes.
Right? So all the tutors, going to the best school, that. And so people are like, well, I'm just going to have my one kid if I won't even have kids at all.
Okay.
The youth all over the world just don't even want to have kids now.
I know. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Reading Normalize It, reading your book, it actually made me reflect on something that I've never shared before. When I grew up in Hong Kong, very conservative town, studied in the States. After Harvard Business School in 2012, I moved to Beijing to start my business, right? I opened etiquette schools in China. And when I was 29 years old, I was in an abusive relationship with, so I decided a boyfriend, and then we got engaged, and I got pregnant. And I very quickly realized that if I had this baby, I wouldn't be able to leave this abusive relationship.
Ever.
And in fact, it was our couples therapist, because we were obviously having a lot of issues. He was physically abusive. He was verbally abusive. He hadn't hit me yet, but I knew it was just a matter of time. Because he locked me in a room. I mean, it was just very, very scary. And he was a big guy, strong guy. He'd break things in the house. And when we went to couples therapy, our therapist, who was a 6'3", huge American guy, who was a former football player, and he was living in Beijing, right? So we were all in Beijing at this time. Me and my ex were there doing a session. And then my ex actually then stood up and started verbally abusing our therapist.
What?
And accusing the therapist of being in cahoots with me.
Of
Left
course.
me. I was pregnant. I was already pregnant. Left, drove my car back home, just left the building, drove my car back home, left me alone, pregnant. Like, you know, me and my therapist were standing out the window watching him drive my car away. My therapist turned to me and said, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to step out of my professional role as your therapist. And I'm going to say something that I'm not supposed to say as a therapist. But are you sure you want to have this baby? Because if you have this baby, he is going to be in your life forever.
Yes.
And that for me was the switch. I said immediately, I knew I have to do something. And I asked him, I said, what should I do? And he said, listen, I've already stepped out of bounds, but like what I've already told you.
I would have said that too.
Is already out of bounds. Who's your closest friend in Beijing? Call her now and think of a plan. And so I called her. We immediately made a plan. I went to her house. Then we called my dad and we called my like next closest friend, who's my business partner. And then we basically within a week, I had an abortion, which I had to pretend was a miscarriage, even to my abusive partner.
So you were able to stay away from him though for that whole week, or did he come hunt you down?
No, well, we were home.
Oh,
I was secretly you have to take a pill for 7 days.
Oh, you went back to the place where the two of you, did you live together?
Which was my apartment, and he had kind of moved into my place because he'd moved over from Hong Kong.
Wow.
Yeah, and so there I was silently like sleeping in the same bed as him, but silently taking the pills to begin the abortion, to induce the abortion, right? And I think it's something like 7 days of taking the pill. It's like a special kind of pill. And then on this X and X day, you're supposed to go to the hospital for the DNC, I would think. Yeah, where they were then going to give me another pill.
Okay.
And he went off to work. And I had to pretend like it was a sudden miscarriage.
Do you think he'll hear this?
I don't care if he does.
How do you feel about that decision, all of it?
I think it saved me.
Yes.
It really saved me.
I do too. I think so too. Because when you have a child with somebody, no matter how far you get away from that person, they'll be in your life. I mean, they can find that child. You would have had to deal with him forever. For
the rest of my life. And I know people, I have friends who were in abusive relationships, whether verbally or, physically, and they have children and they can't leave. I've interviewed episode 1. I interviewed Mary from Selling Sunset, right? I interviewed episode 1 of my podcast, and she talked about, her abusive marriage, and
wow,
and and I remember, because there was so much stigma and shame around it. I mean, I even pretended to. So my father flew in with my stepmom.
Yeah, you mentioned him. That's great that you felt you could talk to him.
His parents flew in. I had to trick them to say, I said it was a miscarriage. So I asked them to fly in as a show of support. And only then could I break up with him, because he wouldn't let me break up with him. And I was actually afraid for my life.
Yes.
And I had to ask his mother for help to break up with him. My poor father.
Did she help you?
She did. I said, please take your son back. I said, I'm not going to tell you all the terrible things your son has done to me. All I'm asking is, you have a daughter. Because my ex had a sister. I said, you have a daughter. How would you feel if somebody treated your daughter this way? Please take him home. Please take him back to Hong Kong.
And he left you alone?
There's a bit of back and forth with abusive partners. It's they don't make it that easy to leave.
No.
And then they try to charm you back and say they're going to change it. It was a bit of back and forth. Afterwards, I heard my father, he turned gray after that. And my father said, I've aged 10 years.
Did you share with him what was really going on?
He knew.
He knew.
At that point, only after the therapist said that, I told my dad everything. and again, for my dad was like, well, what's very clear is if the therapist is saying this.
Yes.
If your therapist feels like he has to step out of, go out of bounds to tell you this is what you have to do, and we back you 100%.
Amazing.
So him and my stepmom knew, and then my two best friends in Beijing knew, but everybody else thought it was a miscarriage. I even actually denied ever being pregnant to some Hong Kong friends.
Yeah.
And one of my Hong Kong friends, who's a fairly good friend of mine, I saw her at an event afterwards, not long afterwards, and I'd lost a lot of weight, so like my tummy was very flat. Nobody could tell. And she's like, everybody in Hong Kong is saying that you were even pregnant. And I was like, I said, well, I'm not pregnant, and that I just left it at that.
Perfect.
And Hong Kong is so conservative. There's a lot of stigma around doing something like that. People don't talk about that. It's the Chinese culture, and I've never talked about it. But I felt that after reading your book, I felt I can't do justice to you, to the book, to
yourself,
episode, to myself, to my listeners, if I don't talk about this.
What is it like to talk about it?
It's emotional, but it feels like a release.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I think therapy is often like the first safe space that people talk about these things. And when just now you were mentioning like some celebrities talking about it, Paris Hilton came out with her memoir, I think a year or two ago, in which she talks about how she had an abortion at the age of 22 because she was too young and wasn't ready. And then at the same time, I don't know if you followed this, but when Roe versus Wade was overturned, a New York businesswoman and socialite called Lauren Santo Domingo, she runs Mode Operandi, and she tweeted to Ivanka Trump saying, she said, Ivanka Trump, you were noticeably quiet today. The high school friends who took you to get an abortion or not. And this made headlines. She later deleted it.
Whoa.
And yeah, and when I think about it, it's like, well, and you never heard anything from Ivanka about it.
Wow.
I do feel that when celebrities come out and talk about it, when people who are known, when they talk about it and they normalize it.
Yes.
And they remove the stigma around it.
Yes.
Right? So Uma Thurman's talked about it. Chelsea Handler talked about how she had multiple abortions. Oprah Winfrey has, also like her childhood was, really tough. And but what it does is it made me feel seen, it made me feel heard, and it gave me strength.
That's so powerful. I feel so honored that you're sharing this with me and that the book actually moved you to want to share with the world about something so intense. I bet you were so afraid.
I was, yeah.
And you got away from him.
Thank goodness.
Did you feel the physicality of the abortion, or did they offer you pain relief? Like, did they give you good care?
It was very painful. It was a good hospital. It was very good care. In Chinese culture, we say you never look at the dead fetus. So when it came out, I remember I screamed because I didn't look, and I closed my eye and I just never looked. And so that at least in Chinese culture, even if let's say you see a car accident on the road or you see maybe like a dead animal, like you never look at it.
Wow.
Because from a energy perspective, like you don't want that negative energy to go into you. Okay. Obviously, this was something different. This was something that was like in my body.
Exactly. But yeah.
And when I think about it, I think, my therapist saved me, really. And telling my story it's kind of healing me.
That is so wonderful and so intense. And does he know?
Who?
The therapist.
Texted him some updates.
Okay. So he knows you're safe and sound.
He knows I'm safe and sound.
That is huge.
Yeah. Whew. But what is the best next step to take for somebody who's going through that or who just went through a miscarriage?
Ideally, people are in therapy. But as we know, a lot of people are not, that prone to turning to mental health professionals, whether it's out of reach financially or culturally. It's not something within the norm. And so not everybody's going to, get mental health help. And that's okay. This book sort of outlines a variety of ways that people can address self-stigma, self-shame, self-blame that doesn't involve a therapist. let's say somebody has a miscarriage and they're thinking, what did I do wrong? Why, what did I do to deserve this? If they don't want to go to a therapist, they could start by writing in a journal. And I know it sounds sort of maybe overly simplistic, but as we were talking about earlier, the risk can be great in sharing with others. And so some people they turn inward, but I do believe that even a first step of writing it in a journal, moving it through us, acknowledging what we've been through, that's powerful in itself.
It's cathartic. Yeah, moving it through us, right? From your heart to your mind to like your hand to on paper.
Exactly. And you could burn that paper even.
Yes.
Like if it says like, my body failed, I'm awful, I don't deserve to be a mother, whatever it is, burn it. It's just that you got it out of you, that you were able to acknowledge for yourself what is really going on inside. And that can be transformative.
What about body image? 91% of women are unhappy with their bodies. Girls as young as 5 express concern about weight. And the numbers make sense because only 5% of women naturally possess the body type often portrayed by Americans in the media.
This is a tough one. I mean, so complex. So it's like nothing I can say in a tidbit of advice can undo all of this, right? Because it's sociocultural, it's familial, it can be, laden with even religious backgrounds or, what you grew up eating and the way that you were shamed or not for what you put into your mouth, or, the way that parents hid certain foods in the cabinet or didn't allow it in the house to begin with. I do think that the unrealistic beauty standards are out of control. I myself have an 11-year-old daughter, and I find myself concerned, with the way she sometimes looks at herself in the mirror or doesn't want me to see her as she's walking from the shower in a towel to her bedroom.
But she's 11 and she's in a towel.
I know. It's like, that's the thing. I'm like, sweetie, you know that I was your age at one point as well, right? And she's like, I know, but I just feel shy about certain things. And she even the other day said that she felt insecure about the hair on her legs. And so even as a psychologist, because I don't work with children, I'm overwhelmed by how am I going to navigate all of this when she gets her period? Do I have a period party like some people have suggested?
Really?
I don't, it's like a thing. And then it's like, well, wait, am I going to have a party every month? I don't think so. That would get old. I want to approach it with her in a way that she feels close to me, that she feels pride, but I also don't want to put pride on her. Like, oh, this is something exciting. It's like, are you a woman? Like if she gets it when she's 11 or 12, like, I don't know. So I think it's complex. And so body image is a tough one. I think if women could try to tell themselves, I am beautiful as I am, even if you don't believe it. I think if you say it enough, you can begin to believe it, and we don't have to look like the billboards that we drive by every day or the magazines, but it's hard to not want to, or even on Instagram, all the images that we see of women in bikinis and stuff. I don't want to call it self-love, but self-acceptance, just being gentle with ourselves.
And that's so important because we're very hard on ourselves now. And
it's crazy.
It's hard to not be hard on ourselves when, like you said, the media portrayal, this, that. It's tough. There are a lot of unrealistic expectations to live up to, but nobody's perfect, right? There's always going to be somebody younger than you, better body than
exactly.
you, smarter than you.
Right. And those people, even models, of course, have insecurities. So it's right. So it's like, we think there's this, somehow an attainable perfection, but even if you embody that, you're still going to have insecurities.
What about sexual trauma? 1 in 3 women globally has experienced sexual or physical violence. 81% of women in the US have faced sexual harassment.
It's such an overwhelming number. That came from my book, right?
Yeah.
Well, as you see in the book, I mean, and again, these are just very complex issues. So I don't want to oversimplify by saying like, get out of the relationship, go to therapy and break up. I mean, that it's not that simple. I am always curious with patients who have some of this history, and I would be curious if you wanted to talk about it too. It's like, how did this happen? Are there, ways in which we can look back on our childhoods and see if we were that much more prone to getting into relationships where things got scary? And sometimes there are, and sometimes there are not. Many people, like you said, the charm and the people who can convince us that they're going to change. A lot of people can be taken in by all of that, and not see the red flags until it's too late. So I do think that people who have either been physically or emotionally abused within their family or afterward with a partner can have a lot of self-esteem related bruises. I don't think that, trying to write one's way through it will do it justice. I do think, in other words, I think that being with a trained professional talking through these things is vital, because it's too much to bear on one's own. And you could tell a friend, you could go to a support group, you could do something anonymous for a while. But I think a therapist needs to help you process the pain. How did this start? And really sort of help with a roadmap. What did you miss that, you now will never miss again, hopefully, in your future? Because we need that help sometimes. And the physical pain of being abused, and also the emotional complexity, it's so insidious, and it can just come out of nowhere that you realize that you're being emotionally abused. And so again, if we don't talk this through, my fear is that not only could it happen again, but the person that has been suffering with it inside is going to think, maybe I deserved it. Maybe I really did do something wrong. Maybe something is wrong with me. That's shame that then, spirals and can eat you whole.
Abortion, I mean, we touched on abortion, but I do want to share the statistics that
Yes.
1 in 4 women in the US will have an abortion by age 45.
Yes.
Yet many feel they must stay silent due to fear of judgment. I mean, that's like, think of like 1 out of every 4 of your girlfriends.
I know. And I include in the book as well that turnaround study. I mean, that most women who have abortions, especially older women, are mothers themselves.
Yeah.
So I think part of this stigma and part of this, judgment is saying, oh, you hate children, when that is not the case at all. So many people have abortions for a variety of reasons, and a lot of those are mothers already.
And I want to add, what taping this episode has meant for me. I never imagined before coming across you and reading your book that I would ever share my story. Ever.
No?
Never. I mean, I thought I would go with it to the grave because of how I was raised, because of Hong Kong society. It's so judgmental. Chinese culture is conservative. Even my Beijing friends said, we will never tell. I mean, my 2 best friends who were at the hospital with me never told a soul. My father also said, don't feel like you need to tell anybody this.
Wow.
And but I think I guess like doing this podcast is very interesting. At first I thought I'm just going to interview people who I think will be interesting for my audience, interesting to me, therefore interesting for my audience. It's actually gone beyond that, where it's been very transformative for me personally.
Good. And
this episode has been very confronting for me, right? Because the title of your book is Normalize It, right?
Yes.
Upending the silence, stigma, and shame that shapes women's lives. And here I'm holding this big part of me burrowed deep down that has been silenced and that I had shame for. And I think that now, and there have been recently these couple weeks I've gone on a sort of more spiritual journey where I think like that combined with this has helped me, has given me the courage to share what, what I shared today. And I think we just have to remember that when we speak our truths, we ignite something bigger than ourselves. So if my story even just helped one listener feel seen or heard, then it was worth it for me.
Amazing. So profound.
Thank you, Dr. Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so beautiful and
a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thank you.
And listeners, thank you for tuning into Mind Your Manners. I'm your host and etiquette life guide, Sara Jane Ho. And remember, no matter what life throws at you, with me in your ear, you got this. Check out the YouTube channel to watch the video, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. I'll see you next Tuesday.